Jules, the other piece to this, as you mentioned there, City, when we say City have said, now this is because there's a 165-page document which basically outlines City's case, which the Times has seen. So what you're about to hear about kind of City's version of events comes from the Times, which had access to this paper. How did they have access to these documents? Well, again, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me that you have to submit documents to the court or to the arbitration panel explaining what your case is going to be. And you have to submit them to the other side as well, right? So that they can prepare and counter, right? Just part of the, I guess that would be the equivalent of a discovery phase. God, I hate lawyers. Have I mentioned that ever?
You have.
So presumably the arbitration panel have these documents. City have these documents because they wrote them.
Yeah,
and the Premier League have these documents.
Yeah.
One of those three parties said, hey, maybe it would be a good idea if we put this out in the public so that clubs out there realize what is about to happen, what could happen, and their fans could happen. People have compared this to the European Super League situation. It was popular uprising from fans and whatnot. I'm not going to speculate which of those three parties, but it's obvious one of those three parties had a bigger interest to go and put this out into the open.
Yeah.
We're okay with that, yeah?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, again, I think this is of massive interest because it can be a game changer, really, if City wins. Like you said, Newcastle, Aston Villa, maybe Chelsea, and then maybe others. We look at this and say, okay, now we can spend as much money as we want. They might do, they might not. The question I have for you is like, okay, let's say City win this and you can have Etihad paying 2 billion for your shirt sponsor because they're just owned by the same people and they can do whatever they want, right? But in Europe, UEFA will still have the same rules, right? So then what? You can't play in the Champions League because...
This is a really, really valid point, which I think a lot of the English media have, because look, there's so much to digest. I think they've kind of missed. I don't think City will go, I don't think they'll be the ones to go and abuse this in air quotes here, because they still have to be assessed by UEFA and they still have to be assessed by UEFA at fair market value. Yeah. Otherwise, they don't play the Champions League. Otherwise, they can... I don't know, they can go and play Real Madrid in the European Super League. Although I guarantee you, European Super League also will have rules like this should it ever happen. Yeah. So from that perspective, this idea that, City are going to turn into some enormous juggernaut, I'm not so sure. Now, obviously, UEFA's fair market value process is going to be different from the Premier League's to some degree because, look, Paris Saint-Germain, right? They got sanctioned in 2014. And then after that, they managed to make it work. They also grew revenues in other ways. So you never quite know what's going to happen. But yeah, I also don't think, and I genuinely don't believe this. I don't believe these. We present this cartoonish image of rich people, right? People from the Gulf, they're fans, they just want to win, and so on. Or we bring up the sports washing aspect. I don't know that that's true for all of them. If they were to do this, right? Let's use the Etihad as an example, right? If let's say, oh, look, we can go and let's increase the Etihad sponsorship to 500 million and then we can go and we can buy Mbappe and Bellingham and whatever. And then we'll be even better, right? And dominate football forever. Well, it's 500 million that's going out of Etihad. So you're hurting one business, right? The Etihad business.
Well, unless they have that money available already.
But they have that money because they earned it, right?
Yeah, true.
So, Etihad has revenue, and they give some of the revenue in sponsorship because they think it'll make them more money. You can pressure Etihad to give you a bigger sponsorship, but if it becomes an absurd amount, in the end, it's still money flowing out of Abu Dhabi.
True.
So you can either send that money to prop up Etihad and help Etihad grow, or you can put it towards Manchester City and help Manchester City grow. I think this whole thing in terms of the return on image and making Abu Dhabi more global and more recognized around the world, I kind of think you already got that from City. City aren't going away. People know what City is.
Yeah.
Why not spend that money on Etihad, which more people take planes. You see what I'm saying? Like at some point, these guys don't want to waste money. At some point, you get bored, right?
Yeah, but
especially when the guy making the decisions, let's face it, Sheikh Mansour is not a football fan. Khaldoun Al-Mubarak, not a football fan.
I know, but this is working for them, right? It's working for Abu Dhabi, for their image, for everything. Like it's working for Qatar, like the Saudis are trying to do similar things.
I think they don't like having the regulation.
Yeah.
And they've made it very clear they don't like having the regulation. But I don't necessarily think, and this is speculation, that they're going to go and turn this and sort of drive home their advantage even more by going spending more absurd amounts of money of using this loophole. They just don't want anybody in their business. They don't want somebody telling them you can't do it. So this makes me think it is more about the 115 charges and the case 100%. In November and how this could impact them.
Do you think so? For me, this is all about the 115 charges. This is the counterattack in a way, in the sense that this is not a really good look on them, I think. And to be fair, the critics coming from England are quite strong over that,
including from some Man City fans.
Yeah, indeed, and rightly so. But it's still not as bad as a look than if they get charged for what they did before and get either relegated, stripped of titles, heavily fined, whatever. And I think they're showing this, and maybe they know already that the 115 charges are going to be heavy on them. So they say, listen,
if they're found guilty,
they're found guilty, this is our last chance. Let's go and do this. And if we are successful, like you said earlier, the 115 charges are going to go into the bin, right? Because
although they still have a problem. I mean, I always bring this up with City fans, many of whom I think are reasonable and realistic about what's happened, some of whom are not, is what is your argument? Is your argument that you did not break these rules, or is your argument that these rules are unfair and they're anti-competitive and there's a cartel and blah, blah, blah?
Right, they've repeated for years that they've never broken the rules, but now they're saying that the rules are wrong and unfair.
Well, could they not have broken the rules? And at the same time, the rules are wrong and unfair, and that's why they're also seeking damages from the Premier League, because they could have made more money from Abu Dhabi or whatever. That's essentially, I think, what their argument is.
Yeah. And there are also some charges that are unrelated to those kind of sponsorship deals, right? The fact that Mancini is paid some by the club at the time he's at the club, and also by companies owned by the Sheikh. This is one of the charge, and that's got nothing to do in this case, right?
Yes, unless they argue that but because that we had to do that because those mean rules at the time with the fair market value forced us to pay money.
Okay, well, that's pushing it. Yeah.
I mean,
when are we going to know about this? Like, when is this happening, and when we will know?
So, according to the reporting, the whole thing will be wrapped up in 2 weeks. So, June 24th, I guess, would be 2 weeks from Monday. Presumably it's 2 working weeks, so maybe a little before that.
Yeah.
The way the arbitration works is it's all private. It's these 3 dudes in a room with going through evidence. Presumably there'll be witnesses called. And then afterwards, they come out and they issue their decision, and then with the written reasons afterwards explaining their decisions. This is based on a 1998 Competition Act that was passed here. Like, I think we've kind of given you facts so far. I think there's a point here to make about commentary, and I think what this is ultimately about, right? And what they have to decide on. Because City have said this is discrimination against people from the Gulf.
Yeah.
Again, according to the 165-page document that the Times are reporting on. And they made a reference to the tyranny of the majority, right? Which your first instinct is to say tyranny of the majority means what? Oh, look, it means democracy, right? Most people vote to give themselves rules. However, within democracy, you also have safeguards for the minority, right? So if a majority of people are, let's say, heterosexual, it's not right that they pass rules where they say, okay, homosexuals go to prison, for example, right? I'm just using that as an extreme example. So there have to be safeguards for the minority within that. And so I think part of the argument is going to be like, hey, guys, this fair market value all works for you guys, but what about us, right? We're bringing money into the game, and you're stopping us from doing that. So that's going to be what they argue. And they're going to say something like, well, if we were a supermarket or if we were a car company, you wouldn't go and impose these rules on us. I think the Premier League's counter argument is going to be, well, hang on a minute. You're a football club that voluntarily joined, or that voluntarily is part of the Premier League, right? You're one of the 20 Premier League shareholders. You choose to be in this club. It's a bit like, Jules, let's say you join a golf club, right? Yeah. And on the golf club, a majority of the members, by 2/3 majority, say, okay, Jules, you're not allowed to wear your PSG kit on the fairway, right? When you're going around, no. Is that the tyranny of the majority, or is it that the club that you voluntarily joined?
Yeah.
Are they allowed to make rules like that?
Set rules, yeah, of course they are.
So then PSG's counter argument is saying, aha, it's not PSG's, probably would be PSG's too. Man City's counter argument is saying, like, well, wait a minute. What if I need to wear the PSG kit? What if that is the only way I can be a member of this golf club? You're discriminating against me. And you can make whatever rules you want within your golf club, unless those rules violate, in this case, UK law. So in other words, if they make a rule that says no people of color on the golf club, that's a violation of UK law.
Yeah.
Or no disabled act, or whatever, right? So that is kind of what we're arguing about here, which...
It's really complicated, to be fair.
It is complicated. I think fundamentally, this is a really bad look, I think, for the Premier League as an entity. Again, I'm not saying it's their fault. Yeah,
of course.
Because the whole strength of the Premier League, and look, this is the most successful sports league in the world, right? I'd even put it ahead of the NFL per capita. It might be different, but just because this is more global and so on, right? That success that was built for many years by Richard Scudamore is that when there were disagreements, when people were fighting amongst each other, it was always contained behind closed doors. It didn't go outside it. There weren't lawyers, Lord Panic, all this nonsense, right? Now, for whatever reason, that equilibrium has been broken.
Yeah.
And again, if you're City, you might argue, well, it's been broken because the other big clubs are threatened by us because we've been so good, because we've won 6 of the last 7 years, and blah, blah, blah. If you take the other view, that equilibrium has been broken because you, sirs, aren't running a sustainable business. You've been cheating. And we need to first and foremost safeguard the league. And part of that is to make it sustainable. And that's why we've got profit and sustainability rules. Because the other thing to bear in mind is, let's say the extreme scenario happens and you get these inflated sponsorships and now suddenly City can spend twice as much. All that does is it's going to raise the cost for everybody else that wants to compete.
Yeah.
And then the Premier League becomes less investable, less sustainable. Those private equity groups who come in and want to make a return for their investors, it's going to be suddenly less appealing because if I have to triple my cost to compete with Man City, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I'm not going to go, for sure.
Final point on this, and I think this is part of the discussion as well, and we're going to get to it separately later, but Pep Guardiola's contract is up in 2025. And again, this is conjecture and speculation, what I'm about to say. But when I look at this and ask myself, why are City doing this? Okay, one could be to somehow avoid the 115 charges. But you know what? The stain's still going to be there.
Yeah.
I mean, some people will think that City have cheated regardless of what happened. You have to get cleared on every charge. We know that.
Yeah. That's
part of football fandom. But if they get away with it because it's deemed that these fair market value rules and these regulations were illegal, City will survive. They'll still be a Premier League club. They won't get the big fine and whatever. But it's going to be an even bigger stain. And I think at that stage, I'm wondering if they're not preparing themselves for some kind of exit. I mean, the ownership.
Okay.
And obviously moving, with the fact that you're ready to turn the page if indeed Pep leaves in 2025, as we said, right? You've left something behind. You've built something incredible that's written history. And now it's time to move on. Because I can't see them wanting to go and spend incessantly, ad infinitum. So I think there's a lot of scenarios there. The other scenario in this is geopolitics. Saudi, obviously involved now in the Premier League, much more involved in football. And there's people who are far better versed than me who've written about this. The relationship between Saudi and the UAE kind of goes up and down and up and down. And there's far more at stake right now, even than football. So I think that could come into it potentially as well.